Good morning and welcome to Real Life Tesla. Our goal today is to set out and see if we can achieve the 322 miles projected by Tesla in the Model 3. Our dual motor, all-wheel drive, long range has an expected 322 miles. Well, we'll see if she can do it. Come along with us and enjoy the ride. Okay, so as we get ready to start here in our experiment for the day, we had two options. We thought, well, one, we could get on the highway and head east as far as we could possibly go, or we could go west on Highway 70 as far as we could possibly go. We've decided to go west so that the sun is not in our eyes this morning. And last night we charged the car up to 100%. And when I looked at my app this morning, it was at 310. And we all know that Tesla says that the dual motor, all-wheel drive, long range, gets 322 miles per charge. So our experiment today is to see if it's like an ice, where when you fill up your car and it calculates the miles, it's based on the last miles per gallon you were getting at the time before you filled up. As I filled up my Cruise yesterday, it went to 497 miles because the last bit of driving that I had done had been highway driving, and when it calculated that estimated range, it was based on what I had been doing before I had charged the car. So I'm not discouraged right now, and so if you stick with us to the end of the video, we will actually charge it to 100% tomorrow morning and see what the charge will be after we've done our little experiment. So we are getting ready to go. We will head on up to the front where Leanne is waiting for us, and we will get on the road. Okay, so we put in Topeka, Kansas, and that charger is showing 316 miles, 5 hours, 2 minutes. It's actually wanting us to stop in Independence, Missouri, to charge for 20 minutes, and will give us we'll end up there with a 9% charge. So this is going to kind of be irrelevant for us because we're going to bypass Independence. We're shooting for Topeka at 316 miles and see how far we can actually go. So let's hit the road. Okay, so as we get ready to set out here, we're going to set up the car a little bit on the way that we like to run her. And I have it as set in my profile, but if we go into our driving mode, we are going to go to chill, steering wheel standard, braking, and we are going to go into our range and we're going to set it for 2. When I filled up this morning, how funny. When I finished charging this morning, the car went to 310 miles. In backing it out, doing a couple of the edits this morning, we're down to 307, but we're not going to let that discourage us. So we're going to go into our trip, and our first trip here, if we hit our 3 dots, we can rename this, and we can call it, let's call it long range test. Now, I can't tell you how many times I had set my odometer to keep track of how many miles I put on my car, when was the last oil change, and 600 miles into my trip odometer, I couldn't remember what it was for. So how nice is that we can put it in here and label it so we can remember later on why we set that trip odometer. Let's hit our reset. We're all set there, so we'll keep track of that. That is on our trip A, and so we can swipe it back out of the way, and we are ready to go. Okay, so we thought we'd check back in with you. I had Leanne jump in the back seat and adjust the camera for the view, and I saw that the seatbelt indicator was on, and I'm thinking, well, why is it on if she's not in the front seat? But it actually shows you that the middle seat in the back row is the one that is not seatbelted in. So it's kind of interesting how that is so accurate, and just another technology benefit of the Tesla. So as we get in here, we're going to go back to our energy, and you can see we're already from 10%, or I believe it was at 10%, we're up to 19% in our estimated arrival. And when we look at our navigation has us going to Independence, Missouri. Topeka, Kansas now is where we're heading as a destination, because that was our original target. That's where we want to charge. So she's still having us stop at Independence. As our energy level anticipation comes up, we're hoping that she will bypass Independence and then take us on to Topeka, and then we'll charge. Okay, so we're checking back in with you, and when we were set at 60 miles an hour in our speed limit, we were tracking at about 240 watts per hour, or watts per mile. Once we kicked it up to 70 when the speed limit changed, we're now tracking around 260, and we're getting into a few hills here, so it's tracking a little bit more energy. But if we look at where we're at on our trip, we've already climbed up to 15%. We had hit actually 20% at one point, because we were still at 60 miles per hour. Now that we've jumped up to 70, she's come down a little bit. So I was getting kind of excited to see that it was continually increasing as we were going along. But then we've jumped up to the 70 miles an hour, she's leveling back out. Okay, so she moved into the left-hand lane to go around slower traffic, but she's not moved out of the passing lane yet. We've been riding in this lane. Now, if we look at our rear view camera, there's a truck coming up behind us, and all of a sudden, once that truck started getting close, she moved out of the passing lane. So does that give us an indication that she'll move out of the passing lane faster if there's a car behind us than if there's not a car behind us? Another element that we can explore while we're on our trip, which is another reason why you want to subscribe to our channel, because we will teach you how to set up your car and how to understand your car so that you can enjoy it and not get frustrated with it when she's not performing the way you think she should perform. So as we go to pass out of another passing lane, or change out of another passing lane around another vehicle, we'll keep an eye on who's behind us and see if that affects how fast she changes out of her lane. Okay, so we are actually looking at when does she decide to change out of the passing lane? We have a small gap here. We're going to see if she wants to change out of the lane because we do have a car behind us. And the last time that we went around a vehicle, she didn't get out of the passing lane right away until another vehicle came up from behind us. So we're seeing if that affects her desire to change over out of the other lane. Now we're gaining on this truck more rapidly than she was able to move over. So we're doing the speed limit. We do have a car behind us. We want to see if she can actually change over. Of course, all these people are just uncooperative. All right, now we're going to see how fast she changes over out of the passing lane. We're not even past the truck, and she's wanting to get over because we have a car behind us. Whoa. That was a little scary. She started to change over too quick, and that truck didn't slow down enough for us, and she was worried about getting over too quick. But you can see the car that is right behind us prompted her to move over quickly as we passed that truck. The last time we went around a vehicle, she actually stayed in the left lane for a while before she moved out of the passing lane. So this is giving me an indication that she is monitoring the rear view camera as well to adjust her timing in moving out of the passing lane. Now we're on 12.5, and this is the new software update. Some of the changes that are being put into place are becoming more relevant as we're actually driving on this excursion. So we'll keep up. We'll check in with you again here as we pass the next car and see how quick she changes lanes as well. All right, so here we go through a little bit of construction. You notice that she's still at 70 even though the speed limit's changed to 60 for the construction. She would be so much more effective in her driving on autopilot if she would read the signs rather than going what's in the map. And as you can see, she's handling the speed, but if there was a police officer by, we could potentially getting a ticket for speeding through a construction zone, which is not a good thing. Tesla needs to move it to where she picks up the speed limit signs and reads them. So the actual speed is 60. So if we were going 60 miles an hour, the speed limit now becomes 70 again. She doesn't pick up and go back to 70. She still stays at her speed limit. So we'll touch it. We'll let her go back up to 70. And just another disappointing thing about the autopilot is she would be so much more effective if she could read the speed limit signs and adjust her speed accordingly that way, rather than simply going by what's in maps, because maps is not always correct. And Elon Musk even said that going by maps in navigation is not effective because you have examples just like this where there's construction or the road is changed. Autopilot or autonomous driving would not be effective because the roads change faster than the maps can keep up with it. So now that she's gone around slower traffic, we're going to see how quick she actually jumps back into the left lane. Notice the last time she was over right away. We do have a truck back here. If we... Oh, she's not not picking up yet there. She is in the camera, so she moved over pretty quick, which is a good thing, which is the way she should be adjusting the driving. But usually, if there's not a car behind us, we're finding that she's taking longer to get over after she's passed the slower traffic. Okay, so we've noticed that the wind is picking up quite a bit as we're seeing the trees along the side of the road blowing in the wind pretty heavy. And so as we're looking at our energy consumption for our trip mode, we're down to 14%. It doesn't seem to be up as high as it was. We had 18% at one point, and we're down to 14%. So we're seeing some other elements that are affecting our efficiency on the road, and just thought we'd check back in with you and let you see that even though we're doing the speed limit and we're doing everything that we have the air conditioning system shut off, and we're doing pretty good because it's 63 degrees outside. We haven't needed the heat or the air. We're not running the heated seats or anything else that might be consuming energy. We're simply navigate on autopilot, and she's been running well. She's been moving around slower traffic and back out of the passing lane. And so checking back in with you here, and wanted to show you where she's at. We just came through Columbia, and the speed limit was 60 miles an hour. And as we came out of Columbia, it is up to 70 miles an hour, and yet my Tesla hasn't changed its speed. The indication shows that the speed limit sign is 70. So even if she's reading maps is telling her that it's 70 miles an hour speed limit, but she is stuck on 60. Another glitch in the system that with her inability to read speed limit signs, I think we're a long ways away from autonomous driving, and kind of discouraging. Okay, so I thought I'd check back in with you again here as we're looking at our consumption, which is the purpose of our trip today, and our destination. Right now it looks like we have a projected 148 mile range. Our battery up here shows we have 152 miles to go. So a little bit of a discrepancy there. When we look at our trip and heading to Topeka, Kansas. Topeka, Kansas was 314 miles from our home, which we think we should be able to make because our battery range gives us 322 miles. We've optimized all of our no heated seats, no air conditioning, no heating, to try to maximize the distance that we're getting on our battery. From Independence to Topeka is 81 miles. So if I add that 177 miles, we've got 151 miles there. If we go back to our energy, we're 151 miles there. So we're basically about 25 miles short. If you add the extra 2 miles, that it's closer than the 322, that would put us about 27 miles short of the 322 range that Tesla says that we should be able to get with this battery. So we're not sure what else we can do to take away. I looked at the weather right now. We've got about a 16 mile an hour wind, which is a little bit west-northwest, and we are heading west. So it's not a headwind, but it is coming from the side, and she is fighting it quite a bit. You can feel quite often the gusts as she adjusts back into the center of the lane as she's driving down the road. We will stay tuned and see how our consumption and our destination will fall into place with that. We may have to cut it short if we're not close to being able to hit our Topeka, Kansas supercharger. Not willing to run out of battery to prove our point, but we will see how it is when we get a little bit closer. There is another charger between Independence and Topeka that is a Tesla charger. We have to come off the highway a little bit to get to it in the southern part of Kansas City. But I'm still looking on the map for third-party chargers, which I thought was supposed to come out in a previous update that I've not seen on the map. So we'll maybe jump over to a better trip planner on my phone and see if there's a backup or an emergency third-party charger we could use if we decide to shoot for Topeka and not be able to make it. So stay tuned. We will let you know as we get closer. Another thing that we're going to do is when we get home tonight, I'm going to recharge it back up to 100% and see if the miles that it will charge is different from this morning. This morning it had 310 miles as a full charge, and I preconditioned the battery. I should say I preconditioned the cabin in the settings so that the battery would hopefully be ready to go when we left this morning. It was still charged in, so it shouldn't have affected the total charge of the battery, but it only gave us 310 miles. We will see what happens to that number as we recharge it to 100% tonight, and see if driving at this consumption rate will extend that number on our next charge. So stay tuned. If you like learning more about what your Model 3 can do, we ask that you please subscribe to the channel, help us grow, and that way we'll be able to get our videos out to more people who are interested. And if you've thought about getting a Tesla, feel free to use our referral code. It'll get you 1,000 miles free charging, which we were able to use on our trip to Mount Rushmore, and I'll tag that video at the end. That covered over half our mileage expense on our vacation to Mount Rushmore. So stay tuned, and we appreciate you. So in one of our previous videos when we went out to Mount Rushmore, we had updated along our trip to 12.1. And 12.1 gave us a glitch in the system to when it would come up to an exit ramp, it would actually switch over to the left lane and say changing lanes to follow route. Well, she did that to us again, even though we're on 12.5. And as you can see, she's been hanging out in the left lane for the last 5 or 6 miles. And I was hoping to figure out what would trigger her to get back out of the passing lane. And we just had a car pass us, as you saw, and that did not trigger her to get out of this lane. She is still maintaining her position in the left lane. But hoping to catch up to this truck and see if we pass the truck, if it will then trigger her to exit the passing lane and get back over. So there is a truck coming up on the right-hand side, but there's a truck coming up quite a bit of distance in the back that was in our lane. And so maybe that triggered her to get over out of the passing lane, which would be really nice to know that she would be respectful of cars coming up from behind, that she could get out of their way. mentioned a few minutes ago about the glitch that we had in the system, where as you were approaching and an exit lane was coming up, that she would switch over to the left lane. I'll show you that clip here. Okay, so we think we found a new glitch in the system. As you're going down the highway in the right lane, when navigate on autopilot, as you reach the exit, she automatically changes lanes into the left, saying that she's changing to follow route. Now, we've not figured out why this is happening. There's no one around, it's empty highways, and yet she changes into the passing lane to avoid that exit ramp of an overpass. And I don't know if it's just overpasses or it could be going under the highway. I'm not sure. We haven't tested it that many times, but this we do know. As she approaches that exit ramp, she bolts to the left lane and says she's doing it to follow route. As you can see from this video, there was no rhyme or reason for it. And we've tested this a couple times, and the last one before this video, she didn't do it. This one, she did it again, and we hope the Tesla can find a fix for it. Okay, so we're going to check back in with you here. As we're starting to plan an alternate route, as our consumption level is getting low and our miles are outweighing it. As you can see here, we have 112 miles left to make it to Topeka. We're showing 73 miles here, and if we look at the current consumption, that's showing 63 miles. So 10 mile an hour difference there. I did check the local weather. We now have a 14 mile an hour gusting wind coming from our left. So I'm assuming that is affecting our range dramatically. Is she battling staying in the center of the lane quite a bit with the gusts that are coming through. It's a little bit flatter here in the territory, and the wind is picking up and making it a little bit more difficult for her to drive. So we have a supercharger in Independence, which is coming up here in 29 miles, which we're going to cancel out of navigation to get past that, and then re-engage it in hopes that she'll calculate. There is a couple of chargers in the southern part of Kansas City, which I really don't want to go to because it would take us off the highway quite a bit. Just past Kansas City is Lawrence, which there's some charge point charging stations there, which are going to be our backup if something dramatic doesn't happen here pretty quick to where we think we can make it to Topeka. So we're going to try to go as low as we can and see how far we can get on this battery charge to get a more accurate total range for a single charge. And I wanted you to see how close she is cutting this, exiting out of the passing lane, because there was a car coming up right behind us. So we touched on this a little bit before, whether there's a car behind us will trigger it to exit the passing lane. And after multiple tasks, unfortunately unable to catch them all on video, we're finding that plays a factor in the aggressiveness she has in exiting the passing lane. Most of the time she won't get over if there's a car or a truck, somewhat close to in front of us, where she'd have to get over and then get back into the passing lane to go around it. But shows that she's thinking a little bit and being courteous to the other drivers, so that's always a good thing to reduce the road rage that goes on out here as it is. to say she executed that perfectly, because I don't know that I would have gotten over with that tractor trailer being so close. That I knew that as soon as I got over to let that Tahoe pass, that I'd be then getting back over into the left lane. But she did, and we didn't break a sweat or break stride in our speed. We were able to maintain it. Now we do have another car here coming up behind us as the traffic is getting a little heavier as we get in closer to Kansas City. And so let's see how quick she'll move over for this car. We're not even past the truck yet. She's got her turn signal on, and over she goes. You can see she's still close to that truck in order to let the car go past us. So perfectly done. One of the things that you kind of have to come to grips with is that it's not consistent. She's not going to do it every time, because every time she's running through the scenario again in her computer, and each variable is a little bit different, so it gives her a little bit different outcome. And if you can understand that, that will help save you some frustration, especially some of the frustration I've gotten, because running a computer, you think it's going to run the same thing over and over and over again. But her program is taking what's going on around her and adjusting her program according to what is taking place. So most of the time it's like clockwork and running well. Every once in a while something will give her an indication and she plays the side of caution. So sometimes she changes lane, starts to change lane, and then comes back because she's playing it cautious, and something gave her an indication that it needed to be different. So we're getting ready to come up to the point now where the speed limit changes, and we're still at 70 miles an hour on the speed limit sign. And I know that somewhere through here it changes to 65 as we get closer to Kansas City. Our mileage is down to 47. You can see the bar on there has changed from green to gold. That actually, I noticed at about 63 miles left, it gave us that change. Let's check back in our consumption. And it's projected now, it's a little closer, 42 miles, and the battery says 47. So it's getting a little closer in line with each other. And I'm assuming that we'll gain a few extra miles when we cut back to 65. We should be losing some of the wind as we get in closer to Kansas City too. So hopefully that will affect us less. But I just don't think we're going to make it to Topeka. And no sooner than I said that and stopped the video is that we're coming up here as where it's changing to 65. It has already changed it on the map to 60. She did not change from 65 to on the cruise control. So we're going to crank her back down and stay on the speed limit. You know, these signs, pretty easy to read. Would help her out in her autopilot. Would also help her out when she's changing interstates from one interstate to another, as she would be able to read the signs. If you look here at this exit, it shows 45 miles an hour. Pretty easy to read. She would be able to then adjust her speed and come to a stop at the end of the ramp a whole lot easier than relying on what Google Maps has, because Google Maps is not very accurate. Alright, so we're 4 miles now in between our projected and what the battery is saying. We still have 87 miles to go to the charger in Topeka. We're going to actually, 87 miles to Topeka. We're getting ready to cut this off of Navigate on Autopilot and let her run on autopilot a little bit until we get through Kansas and or through Kansas City, and then we'll pick her back up and see how close we can get to Topeka and where ChargePoint is going to jump in and save us. So we'll see a little bit. 33 miles. It actually says 32 miles on our consumption. Our long range mile, we've gone 238 miles. If we add that to 60 to 71, a far cry from our 322, which the battery was led to believe that it could do. So we're looking for an alternate route right now. We, if you're a Kansas City fan, there's your Kansas City Royals, and then right behind it is where the Kansas City Chiefs play. And I bet on a Sunday, when both are going on pretty much at the same time, you would not enjoy the traffic whatsoever. So we're looking at where we can actually go and see how close we can get to empty to get a more accurate reading on our mileage. Little construction here. She's doing well to hold her lane, and we are on autopilot. We're not on Navigate on autopilot, as we had to bypass the Independence supercharging station to see how far we can go. And let's see if we can put her back. She's holding the lane really well as she comes out of this construction and back into the dotted lines. So I can't go back to Navigate on autopilot because I don't have the destination put in. But here you can see our speed limit is going down to 55. It did not change on the speed limit. It's still at 65 and the cruise is at 65. So if we go down to 55, like the speed limit, that should help us conserve a little bit of energy as well. She has a hard time reading the signs, and I'll step back in here in a second. As we get through the downtown area, there is a sharp turn in Highway 70, and the speed changes, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in just a second. So here's that sharp turn I was telling you about, and this is why autonomous driving may be a long way off, because as you can see, that takes you down to 45 miles an hour. The speed limit is 55 miles an hour through here. If I'd have been doing the 65 that she had been set to because she did not adjust on her own, she would have stayed at 65 and we would have never made that turn. So that could have been an ugly situation if I had not noticed the sign change myself and brought the speed limit down to 55. She would have never made that 45 mile an hour turn. So I hate to say it, as much as I am so looking forward to complete autonomous driving, is that I think we're a long way off. Here's another one, and we'll see how she does. Of course, she doesn't change. She's still at 55, but she's holding this pretty well. And she did a good job. And that's 10 miles an hour over the recommended speed. But like I said, if I had not changed her down to 55 and she had stayed at the 65 she was headed at, we would have never done it. Now she has caught up and the speed limit has adjusted on the map at 55. So do not know exactly where that happened, as I was trying to make sure she stayed in her lane. But as you go through these more city areas where speed limits change frequently, it would be important to be able to read the speed limit signs and adjust the speed accordingly. Now, I know some of you think that if we'd have been not in a pandemic right now and this would have been heavier traffic or there'd been more tractor trailers, could she have missed the speed limit sign altogether, as being in the center lane and the tractor trailer in the right lane? Speed was just right to where we didn't get to see the sign. But here's a 45 mile an hour speed limit sign. Usually they're on both sides of the highway. In a lot of the downtown areas where traffic is more condensed, the map did go down to 45, but she did not change her speed to 45. So I had to manually change the speed down to 45, or we probably would be sitting in that guardrail right now. Yep. She handled that actually pretty well, because the lane went straight into a Y, as you saw that. I'll go back and show you that again, and I'll save that. Now we're here, we need to exit out of this lane. Oh, but we're not in Navigate on Autopilot, so she doesn't know to do that. But she didn't kick back up into the speed either. So let's bring her back up to speed before all the people behind us get mad. Let's help her change lanes to get over here to Highway 70. You get used to being Navigate on Autopilot, and she would not have made that one. And that was another one where the lane went straight into a Y, and she would not have had enough time to react by the time she saw that white line in the middle. So that was a little nerve-wracking. We'll see how it goes. We're down to 26 miles on there. We've gone 246 miles since we left home, and we'll catch up to you in a little bit. Okay, so here we are in our dilemma. Our next charge point charging station is in 15 miles, and our computer says that we have 10 miles left to go. Our projected says we have 11 miles to go, 10 miles now. Do we turn around, or do we go 5 miles into the battery and hope that we can make the extra 5 miles on it? Without knowing where the charger is, we are actually going to vacate the highway and not take a chance on doing it. So we have to turn around now and go back to the last previous charger, which, you know, now that I think about it, I'm hoping that it is not farther than the one that was ahead of us. So we are going to exit the highway and head back to the last charge point charge station and see if we can make that. So evidently this is a fail. We're at 263 miles on our test. We have 9 miles left. That would put us at 272 versus having the 322 that was advertised when we bought the car. So let us turn around here and see if we can find our way back onto the highway. All right, so here we are. We exited the highway. We got back on because we figured the last charging station would be closer to turn around to, and it really wasn't. So we could have just stayed on and tried to hit the destination. So I was trying to find another charge point, but there was no other ones around us that we could get to. And we got back on the highway headed east and put in, or actually Tesla, the Model 3 came up on navigation, plan your next charging. So the closest one to us was 13 miles away. We had 7 miles left on our battery. So we are going to be either walking or limping into the charging station under our estimated mileage. The sign says charging needed to reach destination. We'll be at -4% when we hit the supercharger. So time to say a little prayer and see how far she will go after she hits 0. Okay, so we are actually at 0 and we want to exit this one. The Tesla directions came up and said we still had 13 miles to go. So I jumped back into the ChargePoint app and actually found one 4 miles closer. So saying a little prayer always helps. And however, we're at 0 and we still have how far to go?
0.8 miles.
0.8 miles to go to the ChargePoint Superstation. So ChargePoint will definitely be an app that you want to have on your phone. However, let's face it, we would have never pushed the car this far if it had not been for this challenge. We would have stopped in Independence if we had been going on past Kansas City and charged up there. So this situation should never happen to you, but if it does, having the ChargePoint app in your phone is worth the few minutes that it took to set up an account, put in a card to make sure that we'll be able to charge once we get there. This is going to be a J1772 charger, so I told you in one of my previous videos that it's always a smart thing to keep that in the trunk and have it, and we do. However, we did not bring the mobile charging cord cable, and that I kind of regret right now, but it looks like we're going to be safe. It doesn't look like it goes down below 0. Where are we at? Keep going. Doesn't say what it's in, does it? And so maybe it's in the Walgreens. Okay, just give you a little bit of insight what's going on. We turned around and backed into the charger, and the notification came up: charge immediately to ensure vehicle will start. Remain responsive and to avoid potential battery repair. So Sentry mode is unavailable. We know that because we're below the 20%. And let's go into energy. We are 0 miles. If we go instant, 0, average. All right. So there. Let's go into charging. We're going to set limit. We're going to go back to 90%, although that is completely unresponsive. So cannot do anything there. Let's open the charge port, because this charger will not have the button on it. Grab my windshield washer because we got lots of bugs on the car, and my 1772 charger, which will fit right in the Tesla. We will plug her in. She's set. Now let's go over here and figure out how to use this here. So there is an app. Let me go into my app real quick. Okay, so we finally got it working, and we're at 23 miles per hour, which, needless to say, we're not going to stay here very long. Just enough juice to get us to the next Tesla supercharger. I did call Tesla roadside assistance. Actually, my wife did, and we talked with them. Roadside assistance does not help you if you run out of charge, so beware. They said they could help arrange a tow truck to come get us and tow us to a supercharger, but that it would be on our own expense. So frustrated with Tesla, I hung up. I actually looked at the charger, and it is a SEMA Connect, and the only way you can pay for it is with this mobile charge, and my Apple Watch did not work on that, so we were really kind of bummed. So I was looking for a number for them, and in the meantime found their website, and it said pay for a charge, and so I pulled it up. We had to put in the serial number for the unit and then put in my credit card, and believe it or not, she started charging. So I'm gonna clean the windshield, we're gonna go get some lunch, and we'll check back in with you in a little bit. Okay, so here we are. We're gonna recap a little bit for what our day ended up. We started out our morning with a full charge. The battery holds 322 according to Tesla. Our overnight charge to 100% gave us 310. By the time we left the house, it was 307, and we actually traveled 274.4 miles. The last mile and a half, we were at zero. Maybe the last couple miles we were at zero, and of course that will cause anybody to panic, as we were searching for a supercharging station to get to, or even what we found here was SEMA Charge. It's a level 2 charging station, which is equivalent to a house charger, and it was charging at about 23 miles per hour. We charged up to 18 miles, and when we were looking at 23 miles per charge, we decided we were not going to stay there. We are actually going to go to Mission, Kansas, which is 8 miles away. So we put in a little bit of a buffer, and we are going to end up with 2% left when we get there. And then we'll hook up to a Tesla supercharger. We'll follow up in the morning after I've charged it to 100% again to see. I did notice that now that I have a little bit of energy in here, it would let me go back and set the limit. So I can go back and set it to 90%, which is what I do normally on a home charge. And tomorrow I will charge to 100%, see if it will go above the 310 that it went to this morning. So we will talk to you again. Okay, so when we finished up at the semi-charge charging station. We had 18 miles. It told us that the mission charger was 8.8 miles away. It ended up being 11.6 miles away. So it's a good thing we put a little extra buffer in there. As you can see, we're starting to charge again. I set my limit to 90% as usual, and we plugged in. We are in the parking lot of a Hy-Vee grocery store, so we'll be able to go in and pick up a couple things that we were planning on going grocery shopping this evening anyways. Well, let's see how we are charging. I know that in the beginning it is a little bit slower, so we'll have to check back with it here in a little bit to see how she's doing. But these are actually different chargers than we're used to. I don't know if these are the new charging stations that they're coming out with, but they're a little bit smaller, a little bit more condensed. That cord was extremely stiff, so this must not be a very old charging station. And but there is 4 sets. It looks like there might be more than that. There's 4A and B, which is what we're on, 3A and B, 2A and B, and then 1B, and then 1A is for a plug-in. So nice little X and a Model S just pulling out. Looks like that might be that's a P85D. Nice brake calipers. And so here we are. We're gonna go in, pick up a few things while we're charging, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We would have gotten home this evening and gone grocery shopping, but we'll take care of that now. So let's go. So we're almost home, and we have 9 miles left on our meter, and a pop-up comes up and says, please plan your next charging stop. And so I hit OK, and up comes the Tesla superchargers. The closest one is 11 miles away. It doesn't give you any third-party charging ports to navigate to. So because of the fact that we're only 5 miles from home, that's where we're headed. But the update before last, I thought, came out with third-party charging stations in Navigate, and it does not. So make sure that you have a backup on your phone, because you never know how close you may be to needing a third-party charger. Okay, a few things that we learned on our trip at the end here. Most of y'all know that it does consume power while on idle, as we see when it sits in our garage, and it decreases in mileage before we actually go out and drive it. A little summary of our trip. And one thing that we learned when we were almost home was that if you go into the app and hit charging, it will bring up your superchargers first, but at the bottom it will show you third-party chargers. Wish we'd have known that when we were driving, but that's why we're here, is to help share with ideas with you, so that if the time ever arises, that you will know what to do. We thank you so much for going along with us on our ride, and we'll see you next time at Real Life Tesla. Okay, so to wrap up our trip, we're here the next morning. I set my charge to 100%, and it's still only charged to 310 miles. And as a reminder, we have the dual motor, all-wheel drive, long range. The specs from Tesla says that we should be getting 322 miles on our battery, and for the second time in a row, it is only charged to 310 miles. Don't really know why, but it is actually plugged into the charger right now, So anything that it's using should be coming off of the charging and not from the battery. But it is what it is, and we will see you on down the road.